Alright, so it's been a while since I've recorded a video for Star Trek and Autism, but I was thinking about something and I really thought it was important to tell you guys. I was watching Cogenitor, which is the episode of Enterprise where they come into contact with a three-gendered species and the third gender is kind of overlooked and just not really seen as somebody who matters at all. And to be quite honest, it made me think of my students who also have autism. I mean, I have autism, but it's a vastly different kind of autism that my students have and that my students deal with. They are often overlooked because they don't speak much and because it's very difficult for them to learn. So a lot of people would say, why bother teaching them at all? I obviously would never say that because I've dedicated my life to helping to teach them. And my favorite little itty bitty parts of the day are when I see that little shining light and they've learned something, and it just warms my heart beyond belief. But I was watching this episode, Cogenitor, where they overlook these cogenitors, and they just assume that they can't learn because, or not that they assume, they don't care whether or not the cogenitor learns because they're only there for one purpose, and that's to help procreate the species. But how is that right? How is that fair? The cogenitor is just as smart as everyone else. They're just not given the opportunity to learn. And that being said, my students may learn differently than everyone else, and they may struggle with concepts more than other people, but that doesn't mean that they can't learn. That doesn't mean that they can't learn to write, and it definitely doesn't mean that they can't learn to read. My students are miraculous at tasks that people would generally loathe and abhor, like folding pizza boxes at Sharky's, or sorting cans into boxes at the local food bank, or hanging up clothes for the local Goodwill, or anything like that. My students rock. They are pros, and I don't know what that means in regards to their intelligence or perceived lack thereof, but they could make a real contribution to this world. And so that makes me wonder in Star Trek, because we're going to discuss gender identity tomorrow. I was watching this episode and maybe they're missing out on a huge, huge part of something that could make their world very vastly different if they just had the cogenitors learn to read, learn to contribute to society. I mean, yes, they're contributing to the eventual continuation of their society, and no, their society would not be able to exist without them. But I have to say that people with autism definitely have this je ne sais quoi, which is French for I don't know what, but it's more of like there are a lot of savants. Like, I am freaking amazing at knitting. I make these amazing Star Trek bears, and I don't think that I could be this amazing at crocheting and knitting if I didn't have autism and were not perseverating on knitting and wanting to do it all the time. I think this happens a lot in Star Trek. It's not just Cogenitor. It is that one episode where they meet the Mank. There's the Valakians and the Mank are completely ignored. They're just given the menial tasks and given what they need to survive, but they're actually quite bright. And the Mank organize Phlox's samples by family and by family bond, like by blood type and by relation or something, and Phlox is really impressed, and they end up not giving the Wallachians the cure because they feel like the Mank are on the verge of some sort of evolutionary change in which the Wallachians are going to die out, but that's because the Mank are actually going to like overcome them. They're going to surpass them. But they were overlooked. And the Starfleet officers really felt kind of horrible about it. And the question, I guess, is, what do we do about that? I mean, if we were going out into the world, the universe, and exploring other planets, and we have to try viciously hard not to put our own views on that, it might be really difficult to not talk about what we think and put our culture on other people. That being said, I know what it feels like to be overlooked. And I know what it feels like to feel like nobody cares. And I would imagine that my students probably feel the same way, because in the real world, it would be very hard for my kids to survive without help. Most of them don't even get safety issues. Like, they don't even understand that we need to stop at a driveway before we cross the street to be safe and make sure we don't get hit by a car. So, yeah, they require a little more special attention and a little more help. But that doesn't mean that they should be overlooked. And that doesn't mean that anybody in this world should be overlooked. Well, I've been going on for 7 minutes, so live long and prosper, and I will see you guys soon.